What is up, everybody? It's Animac here for Anime Uproar, and Deku's spectacular return to the UA battlefield has completely changed the game in Boku no Hero. But Deku has just had to face the terrible truth for the very first time. Bakugo is technically dead, although Edgeshot is trying to revive him. The other heroes are also severely injured and on the brink of death, and Shigaraki just keeps getting stronger as he unleashes his final form upon the world. Deku's heroic rage versus Shigaraki's vicious destruction are clashing, and the fate of the entire world is at stake. So let's get into it. You guys know how this works. If you enjoy our videos, you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment. It only takes you a second, but it really helps us with that YouTube algorithm. And if you're new to the channel, or maybe you watch our videos, but you just haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. Finally, this video will of course contain MHA manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. Okay, so in the previous chapter, Deku finally returned to the UA building and to the center stage of the story with his epic green Japanese Spider-Man entrance. But it wasn't all good news for the heroes, because Shigaraki had also just unlocked a brand new power. His mutations evolved further still, transforming his body into its optimal form. And so the chapter ended as Shigaraki in his final form, also known as the Apex Legend Shigaraki form, came face to face with Deku and an epic clash ensued. The latest chapter starts off with a quick flashback explaining how Deku was able to return to the UA so quickly. As I mentioned in my last video, Deku had spotted multiple objects flying towards him back at the end of chapter 357, but it was never revealed to us what those objects actually were. Then, in the previous chapter, as Deku made his epic return, we saw the jets from Stars and Stripes' squadron flying in the sky above Deku. Chapter 367 confirms that the objects that had approached Deku back in chapter 357 were in fact members of the Stars and Stripes squadron. Members who disobeyed direct orders to leave Japan, and instead they decided to stay here and help fight the villains in any way that they could. That is a pretty big deal, since these are members of the American Armed Forces who decided to go rogue in order to help fight in another country. Something like that would be massive news if it ever happened here in our own world, but in a world with superheroes and supervillains, it's just like a passing side note. Deku had used Black Whip to grab onto one of the jets, and he was pulled back to UA much faster than he would have been able to arrive otherwise. I, for one, am glad that this happened, because at this crucial stage of the story, the final act of the story, having Deku not playing any sort of important role for 6 months in real time just doesn't seem right to me. Like, we had 3 major battles going on at the same time with the fate of all of Japan and the world at stake. I guess 4 battles if you want to count Okuto Island, although I don't think we should count Okuto Island. And yet Deku, the main character, was stuck flying out there somewhere off the coast of Japan, and he was unable to contribute to any of the battles. But Deku is finally back now, and after getting a pep talk from the squadron pilots about the need for Deku to honor the memory of Stars and Stripes by taking down the greatest villain to ever live, we are taken back to the present where Deku is already engaging in battle against Apex Legend Shigaraki. Deku manages to land a blow on Shigaraki, and the villain can already tell that Deku seems stronger than he was before. Deku has definitely gotten stronger since he last faced Shigaraki in Jakku, and he has unlocked new quirks. We can assume that he has unlocked all of his quirks by now, although we still haven't seen him use the second One for All Users quirk, so we don't know what it is yet. That said, the all-for-one personality within Shigaraki does recognize that Deku is now using Fajin, the third One for All Users quirk, which he has personal experience with from back when the third user was still alive. Thanks to his ability to effectively use Fajin and other quirks in tandem, Deku is able to actually push Shigaraki back long enough for him to survey the situation on the battlefield. Deku apologizes for being late and asks if everyone is okay, but what he sees next absolutely crushes him. All the main heroes who were fighting on this battlefield are severely injured or on the verge of death. Bakugo technically is dead, at least clinically speaking, and Deku even notices his All Might Hero card on the ground beside his body. Deku is absolutely destroyed by this, and that's not even close to being all the bad news that he's going to get. Genist is on his knees and barely moving. Miruko is literally torn apart and unconscious. Sun Eater and Nejire are also severely injured and unconscious, and to make things even worse, this is the exact moment in which Shigaraki / All for One decides to taunt Deku. He reminds Deku that Deku was too late for the party, implying that if Deku had been here earlier, he could have saved everyone and he could have prevented this tragedy from happening. Faced with this taunting and the cruel truth about the situation on the battlefield, Deku begins to lose control of his emotions. And so his body and his quirk begin to morph into a vicious berserker form that threatens to spiral out of control. And this, by the way, is exactly what All for One / Shigaraki is hoping for. He wants Deku to be blinded by rage. He wants Deku to start making hasty and reckless decisions, and he wants to take advantage of these reckless decisions to break Deku's spine and put him out of commission for good. As we all know by now, All for One loves to engage in psychological warfare. He loves to psych his opponents out, which leads to the opponents losing their cool and making mistakes, and that is exactly what he's hoping is going to happen to Deku. We saw something similar happening to Endeavor a few chapters ago when he lost his cool and made a hasty move. But thankfully Midoriya is still conscious, and after last week's peachy super move, he jumps in with yet another overpowered super move. In fact, this is one of the most overpowered super moves in the history of anime and manga, Talk no Jutsu. Midoriya tells Deku that it's alright. He knows exactly how Deku feels, and he also feels terrible about the fact that he wasn't able to do more to protect everyone who got hurt. But Midoriya also tells Deku that the situation is not as bad as it looks. Despite being severely injured, all the heroes on the battlefield are still alive. They are all still breathing. And although Bakugo is technically dead, Edgeshot is currently working to revive him from the inside. Midoriya says that he's sure Edgeshot will succeed. So even though they've suffered some losses, none of these losses are actually permanent. Everyone can still make it out alive. The important thing that Deku has to remember now is that All for One wants him to lose his cool and make a stupid mistake. So Deku has to overcome his rage and keep his emotions in check. There is still hope, so Deku can't give up. He has to keep his wits about him and he has to fight smart. All for One / Shigaraki says that this is naive idealism and it's nothing but a silly fantasy. But Midoriya screams that if anyone can turn fantasy into reality, it's the heroes, and they are heroes. These words remind Deku of the lessons that All Might and the previous users of One for All had taught him. He is also reminded of the members of Stars and Stripes' squadron who disobeyed orders because they believed in him. And with all that, he manages to regain control of his emotions. Now backed up by the quirks of all the former One for All users, at least the ones who had a quirk, Deku wraps Black Whip around his face like a scarf. He then stares at the villain with a fierce look in his eyes, and he addresses All for One directly. Deku asks, All for One, is Shigaraki still there? And that is how this chapter ends. And this was big. We were all wondering how Deku would react once he saw the carnage on this battlefield. And we knew that he would blame himself for everything that happened. That's because he was supposed to be here on the UA battlefield and he was supposed to be backing everyone else up. The fact that he slipped up and got himself teleported to the wrong location is going to eat him up on the inside, and many of us were speculating that when he sees Bakugo's seemingly dead body, Deku might snap and the raw power of All for One and all its quirks could consume him. This would be a disaster because it could lead Deku to make bad decisions, which would leave him open to a deadly attack from Shigaraki. Like, just imagine if Deku went nuts and started destroying everything around him, and the collateral damage resulted in Monoma losing sight of Shigaraki. That split-second mistake would allow Shigaraki to use all his quirks again to regenerate his entire body, and then everything the heroes did up to this point would have been for nothing. That said, I am still convinced that something like this will happen eventually. Yes, Midoriya was able to calm Deku down for now, and yes, Bakugo will almost certainly survive. But if something else happens during this fight, like if one of the big three is killed or some other UA student that Deku is close to is killed, Deku may still snap and go berserk. He has a lot of power within him now, and unless he can control his emotions perfectly, that power will threaten to consume him. And in such a stressful battle to the death situation such as this one, controlling your emotions perfectly is almost impossible. And I mean, from a storytelling perspective, let's be real. We all want to see Shigaraki at full power with the full use of all his quirks, going up against Deku at full power and with all of his quirks unlocked. So I do think that something will happen that will break Monoma's erasure and allow Shigaraki to reach his full potential at some point in the future. If Shigaraki can figure out a way to get to Aizawa, he might be able to kill two birds with one stone. He will stop the erasure, at least eventually, and at the same time he will enrage Deku, leading to him losing control and acting recklessly. At that point, even Deku's final quirk, whatever it turns out to be, may not be enough to stop Shigaraki in his Apex Legend form and with all his quirks fully functional, including super regeneration. That is when I believe that all of Deku's quirks will suddenly merge into one single ultimate quirk. Deku will reach Quirk Singularity, and his body will then also evolve in a somewhat similar way to Shigaraki. It won't be exactly the same as Shigaraki because he had all those Ujiko modifications and Deku simply didn't, but at the same time Deku has less quirks than all of All For One's stolen quirks, so we'll see how it goes. We will then see the greatest single clash in the history of MHA as full power final form Shigaraki goes up against full power Quirk Singularity Deku, and that is going to be absolutely epic. That at least is my theory for how this whole thing will ultimately end, but let me know what your theories are down below. My biggest worry is that Deku is going to try too hard to save Tenko Shimura, who is hiding somewhere within Shigaraki, something that this latest chapter even hinted at, and I believe that this could lead to some sort of anticlimactic Talk No Jutsu ending, or it could lead to Deku making the mistake of going easy on Shigaraki and getting someone else killed as a result. What do you guys think? Will any major character actually die by the end of the manga? And if so, who will it be? Will it be Aizawa, All Might, Endeavor, Shigaraki, Monoma? It better not be Mirio or Miruko, that's all I'm saying. If you guys enjoyed this Boku no Hero video and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment right now. It really helps me out with that YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't already, please take the time to subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. It is a completely free but very important way of supporting the channel here on YouTube. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Anime Uproar. Big thank you to all of our Anime Uproar patrons for making videos like this one possible. Special thank you to Trucker Tim, a disciple of Lord Twigo himself. And I can't forget all of our The One tier patrons, including Alpha Sigma, Pate Heffa, The Toasted Chi, Corey McGowan, Owen, Taylor, and Anime S Code M. Finally, thank you to all of our other patrons, including Pro Hero tier patrons, the one and only Gilgamesh, Angel Cruz, Alicia Octor, Fatboy Games, Kaido Might Be a Duck, Alivania, Sandy, and the School Bus. If you enjoy our videos and you feel that they provide value to you, consider supporting us on Patreon or by becoming a channel member. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys!